Highway 29 runs 260 miles across the top of Wisconsin. Abbotsford, Thorpe, Stanley, Boyd, Cadott. Towns you pass through in 90 seconds if you don't slow down. At night, the corridor empties out, and the road becomes what it has always been underneath, a long, dark line between places where nobody's watching. On the 11th of November, 2024, a state trooper walked a slow circle around a 1998 Buick Century on the shoulder outside Boyd. Faded maroon. Rust blooming through both rear wheel wells. His flashlight came up over the trunk lid and stopped on the license plate. 3 of the 4 mounting screws were the originals, brown, seized, rusted into the frame. The 4th one was silver, clean, sitting at an angle, half a turn from falling out. Most troopers write that up as an equipment violation, if they write it at all. A $20 fix. A driver in a hurry with the wrong screw in the coffee can. Trooper Daniel Vance did not write it up. He stood there in the cold, with his hand flat on the trunk lid, and did not move for 11 seconds. Because Daniel Vance had spent 10 years looking at the back ends of old sedans on this exact stretch of road. And he was not looking for a loose screw. He was looking for a car. Her name was Clara Vance. She was 29 years old. She was a nursing assistant at a long-term care facility in Abbotsford. She worked the 3 to 11, and on the night of the 14th of November 2014, she left work, got into a 1998 maroon Buick Century, and drove east on Highway 29. Nobody ever saw her again. Nobody ever found the car. She was Daniel Vance's older sister. Tonight, a decade of the wrong suspect, a slab of concrete poured on a county permit, and 1 mismatched screw that a man had been waiting 10 years to find. Abbotsford, Wisconsin, sits where Highway 13 crosses Highway 29 and holds about 2,300 people. Clark County on one side of the street, Marathon County on the other. The line runs down the middle of the road, which mattered in 2014, because it meant 2 sheriff's departments each believed the other one had the file. Clara had worked at the facility for 6 years. She knew which residents needed to be talked to before they were touched. She kept a spiral notebook in her bag with the names of everyone on her floor and what they liked, and she updated it in the parking lot at the end of every shift. She was 29. She was making $11.40 an hour, and she was 4 months into a separation from her husband. His name was Ray Halloran. He worked seasonal at a cranberry operation near Dorchester and did small engine repair the rest of the year. The separation was not violent. It was the other kind, where 2 people run out of money, then out of patience, then find they have nothing left to say across a kitchen table. They were still talking. That is the part everybody would later get wrong. They had a plan to try again in the spring. Clara had moved into a rented half-duplex on 2nd Street. Ray had stayed in the house outside Colby with the dog and the debt. On the 14th of November, she called him from the facility parking lot at 11:06 p.m., the way she usually did, and told him the Buick was making a noise again. A grinding, she said. Front end. Getting worse. He told her to take it to the shop in Thorpe in the morning and not to drive it hard. She said she was tired. She said she would call him tomorrow. That is the last confirmed contact with Clara Vance. Logged by the carrier at 11:06, ended at 11:10. The next call from her phone came 41 minutes later at 11:51, and it was not to Ray. At 11:51, Clara Vance placed a 2-minute call to a 24-hour towing number listed in a regional phone directory. The line rang through to a mobile phone. The Buick had died on the shoulder of Highway 29, 9 miles east of Abbotsford. Flat farmland. No streetlights. In November, at midnight on that stretch, you can stand on the center line for 20 minutes and not see a car. She called the tow number at 11:51. She did not call Ray again. She did not call her brother, a Clark County deputy who was off shift and 11 minutes away. Daniel Vance has thought about that for 10 years. He has an answer he does not like. that she had already called him for a jump start in September and a ride in July, and she did not want to be a person who kept calling her little brother. So she called a stranger with a truck, and a truck came. The man who answered was Wade Merrick, 38 years old. He ran a one-truck towing operation out of a salvage yard south of Boyd. 6 acres of dead vehicles behind a plywood fence, inherited from an uncle, held together with cash jobs and a rollback he drove himself at all hours because he had no employees. He was never interviewed in 2014. He was never so much as a name in the file, and the reason for that is the most ordinary failure in this entire case. Merrick's towing number was listed in a directory under a business name, a name that did not match the name on the mobile account, because the mobile account was in his late uncle's name and had never been changed after the man died in 2011. When investigators pulled Clara Vance's phone records 3 days later, they saw a 2-minute outgoing call at 11:51 p.m. to a number that came back subscribed to a deceased man in a town 20 miles away. They ran it. They got a disconnected landline and an estate. They wrote it down as a wrong number. The detective who wrote that down was Alvin Cobb, 22 years with the Clark County Sheriff's Office. He was not lazy and he was not stupid. He was one investigator with 4 active files, and he had a 2-minute call to a dead man's phone number on one hand and a separated husband on the other. He went with the husband. Everybody goes with the husband. Ray Halloran was interviewed 6 times between November 2014 and March 2015. He came in every time without a lawyer, which his own family begged him to stop doing. He took a polygraph he was not required to take, and the report came back inconclusive on 2 questions. The worst possible result. Not a clearing, not a catch. Just a smear. His truck was searched twice. The house outside Colby was searched with a warrant and then searched again with a cadaver dog. The dog alerted on a corner of the basement. They opened the concrete and they found a 50-year-old cat. That detail made the regional papers. The cat made the papers. Ray Halloran read about his own basement in a newspaper at a gas station in Dorchester. He was never charged. There was never anything to charge. But in a county of 34,000 people, never charged is not a verdict. It is a permission slip. The Cranberry operation did not bring him back the next season. He moved to a rented room in Neilsville, then out of the state entirely, to a warehouse job in Illinois where nobody knew what his last name meant. And Daniel Vance believed it. He believed Ray Halloran killed his sister, and he believed it for 6 years. He was a deputy in the county where it happened, barred from the file the way any officer is barred from a case involving his own family. So all he had was what everybody else had: the interviews, the polygraph, the basement, the papers. He stopped speaking to Ray in 2015 and did not speak to him again for 9 years. The file went cold in an unremarkable way. Cobb retired in 2017. The file moved to a shelf. In 2019, it was reviewed by a cold case unit that existed for 14 months before its grant expired. And the reviewer wrote 1 page recommending a re-canvass of towing and roadside assistance providers along the corridor. Nobody did the re-canvass. There was nobody to do it. In 2018, Daniel Vance transferred out of the sheriff's office and into the Wisconsin State Patrol. He requested the corridor. He requested nights. This is a man who volunteered for 6 years to work the loneliest shift on the loneliest road in the state. And every command staff who signed that request assumed it was because he had no family at home. It was because the car was never found. Here is the thing that separates this case from a coincidence. And we want to be careful with it because Trooper randomly stops the exact car is a story that should make you suspicious. He did not randomly stop it. Daniel Vance kept a notebook. 6 years of nights on Highway 29 and its feeder roads, and in that notebook were the plates of every General Motors sedan of that body generation he had encountered on that corridor. Century, Regal, Cutlass, Lumina. Anything that could wear a 1998 Buick's sheet metal or take its parts. By November of 2024, the notebook had 1,409 entries. He was not pulling those cars over illegally. His supervisors reviewed 6 years of his stops, and it holds up. Lawful stops for actual violations, speed, lane deviation, a burned-out plate lamp, an expired tab, at a rate consistent with his shift and his post. What he did that other troopers did not do was this. On every old sedan, he walked the vehicle. He looked at whether the plate screws matched. Because a car that has been hidden has to wear a plate that is not its own. And a plate that gets changed loses screws. Somebody in a hurry, in the dark, in a salvage yard, reaches into a coffee can and grabs whatever is in there. Sergeant Paul Okafor, his post supervisor, said something in an interview that we're going to quote directly because it is the whole case in one line. Every trooper on that corridor was looking for drunk drivers, and Danny was looking for one car. Same shift, same road. He just never stopped looking at the back of the vehicle. At 11:14 p.m. on the 11th of November, 2024, a maroon Buick Century drifted onto the rumble strip twice and a quarter mile east of Boyd, and Trooper Daniel Vance activated his lights. The driver pulled over immediately, signaled first, came to a stop fully on the shoulder, well off the lane, like a man who had been stopped before and knew exactly how to do it right. The plate on the back of that car came back registered, current and valid to a 1996 Oldsmobile Cutlass. And on the bottom right corner of the plate frame, one silver screw sat crooked in a hole that had been opened and closed more than once. The dash camera recorded what happened next, and the audio is on the public record now, and it is 11 seconds of a man not saying anything. He crouches. He puts the beam on the screw. He reaches out with a gloved thumb and turns it, and it turns freely, and he stops. Then he stands up and he keys the microphone. He did not ask for the plate. He had already run the plate. He asked the dispatcher, Renata Ruiz, to run the vehicle identification number visible through the base of the windshield. And then, before she answered, he asked her to stand by for a second number. Because Daniel Vance had spent 6 years learning where the numbers live on that generation of car. The one on the dash is the one that gets swapped. There is another stamped into the sheet metal under the driver's carpet and a label inside the door jamb. The dash number came back clean. It came back to a car in Iowa that had been crushed in 2016. A dash VIN that returns a crushed vehicle is not an error. It is a restamp. It means somebody put a different car's identity onto this car's body and did it well enough that the car had been registered, titled, insured, and inspected for 8 years. Ruiz asked him to confirm. He confirmed. Then he asked her to pull Clark County case file 2014-1147 and read him the VIN of the missing vehicle. There is a pause on the recording of 8 seconds. Then Ruiz reads 17 characters. And then she says his name, not his call sign. She says Danny, and asks him to wait for backup before he approaches the vehicle again. He waited. For 19 minutes he stood behind the driver's door of a car that had his sister's spare tire well under 600 pounds of nothing. And he waited, and he did not open the door, and he did not say a word to the man inside it. Wade Merrick sat with both hands on the wheel the entire time. He never turned his head. The car was not searched on the shoulder. It was sealed, loaded onto a flatbed by a towing service from a different county, and taken to a secure state facility in Eau Claire. It was opened there the following afternoon under a warrant, on camera, by a state crime lab team. The trunk lining was not original. It had been replaced with carpet from a different vehicle. cut slightly wrong and glued. Under it, the spare tire sat in its well on top of a bundle wrapped in blue polyethylene sheeting and sealed with 3 kinds of tape. The oldest of them, a hardware store duct tape that had gone brittle and amber. Inside the bundle, a canvas work satchel. A pale blue nursing scrub top, folded. A wristwatch with a cracked crystal. A film canister holding a wedding band and a second, thinner ring. And a spiral notebook, warped and stuck together at the edges, holding the first names of 11 nursing home residents and, beside each one, a note about what they liked. The lab separated 91 pages of that notebook over 4 weeks. It is the most complete document anyone has of who Clara Vance actually was. He kept it. That is what you have to sit with. He did not destroy it. He did not bury it with her. He did not burn it in a barrel in a yard full of things that burn. He wrapped it in plastic, put it in the wheel well of the car she died in, put the spare tire on top of it, and drove that car for 10 years. The DNA work took 11 days. The scrub top and the satchel carried Clara Vance's profile. So did a stain on the underside of the rear seat cushion that had never been cleaned because it had never been visible. And on the brittle amber duct tape, on the adhesive side, along an edge where a thumb had pressed a fold down in 2014, they recovered a partial that matched Wade Merrick. Merrick was interviewed on the 13th of November by 2 Division of Criminal Investigation agents. Daniel Vance was not in the building. He was not permitted within a mile of it. He agreed with that decision, and he sat in a diner in Chippewa Falls for 6 hours with his phone face down on the table. For the first 4 hours, he was calm and specific. He bought the car at auction. He rebuilt it from a salvage title. He had paperwork, and the paperwork was real because he had made it real. A rebuilt salvage application filed in December 2014 for a wrecked Cutlass, with an inspection that in that era, in that county, was a form and a fee. He did not hide the car. He laundered it. He gave a dead woman's Buick the legal identity of a crushed Oldsmobile, then registered it, insured it, and renewed the tabs every year for 10 years. Which is also why he could never get rid of it. Selling it meant a title transfer. A title transfer on a rebuilt salvage in Wisconsin means an inspection, and an inspection means a second set of eyes on numbers he had stamped himself with a hammer and a punch in the winter of 2014. Scrapping it meant handing the whole body to somebody with a torch. He had built himself a car he was not allowed to stop driving. At hour 5, an agent put the photograph of the notebook on the table. Not the satchel, not the rings, the notebook open and the 11 first names on page 1. Merrick asked whether the family was going to get it back. And then he told them where she was. On the 6th of December, 2014, 22 days after Clara Vance disappeared, Wade Merrick applied to the town for a permit to pour a 20 by 30 concrete pad behind the equipment shed at the salvage yard. Slab on grade, 4 inches, wire mesh. Approved on the 9th. The pour was inspected on the 12th. The permit is a public record. It has been a public record in a filing cabinet and then a database for 10 years. Clara Vance was recovered on the 19th of November 2024 from beneath that slab at a depth of 51 inches in the southeast corner, under 6 inches of concrete and 4 feet of clay that Merrick had dug with a rented mini excavator he paid cash for and returned clean. The medical examiner's finding was blunt force trauma to the head. Manner of death, homicide? Daniel Vance was on scene. He was not working. He stood outside the tape for 9 hours in a borrowed jacket, and he was the first person the recovery team came to. As for why, Merrick's account, given across 2 days and never repeated in court, is that the Buick was a legitimate call. He arrived. He hooked it. He told her the tow and the repair would run more than $400, and she told him to put the car back down, and she got out her phone. He says there was an argument about money. He says she was going to call someone else. He says he did not plan it. He also filed a permit to pour concrete over her 22 days later. Those two statements cannot both be true, and a jury will never have to decide, because on the 28th of February 2025, Wade Merrick pleaded to first-degree intentional homicide and hiding a corpse and was sentenced to life without the possibility of extended supervision. On the 14th of November 2024, Daniel Vance drove 4.5 hours to a warehouse outside Rockford, Illinois, and waited in the parking lot for a shift to end. He had not spoken to Ray Halloran in 9 years. He had believed, for 6 of them, that the man was a murderer. Neither of them has said what was said in that parking lot. Halloran told a reporter only that Daniel apologized before he said anything else, and that he did not have to. Alvin Cobb, 68, retired 7 years, was told by phone at his home in Neilsville. He asked one question: what was the number? Not the name. The number, the 2-minute call at 11:51 that he had run in 2014, that came back to a dead man in another town, that he marked as a wrong number at 2 a.m. with 3 other cases open on his desk. They read it to him. He said thank you, hung up, and did not comment publicly again. Highway 29 is still 260 miles of dark line across the top of Wisconsin. The Buick was released to a crusher in 2025 at the family's request. The slab has been broken up and hauled away. Daniel Vance still works the corridor. He still works nights. He was asked, in the only interview he has given, why he has not requested a transfer now that it is over. He said the notebook had 1,409 entries in it, and one of them was the right car, and it took him 10 years to walk up to it. Then he said, somebody else is out here driving one too. 10 years. 4 rusted screws and one that wasn't. A permit filed in a public office in December of 2014 that anybody could have read. The truth was never hidden. It was just never looked at by somebody who had a reason to look. If you know a case like this one, a small detail that broke it open, a file that sat too long, a name nobody chased, put it in the comments starting with the word case in capitals. Every episode of this series starts in that thread. Case file number 4 is about a county weighmaster who noticed a truck came back 400 pounds lighter than it left, 11 times in a row. Watch what you drive past.